The bitter taste of hidden evil, a divine deliverance in the heart of everyday life. The midday sun kissed the city with that familiar warmth that invited a pause, a breath in the hustle and bustle of routine. For Jully, it was just another day woven with the golden threads of joy and normalcy. In her early 20s, she carried beauty not only in the delicate features of her face or the easy smile that lit up any room, but in her very essence. She was a vibrant soul, a magnet for good energy, known for her kindness and ability to make friends wherever she went. Co-workers adored her, neighbors greeted her warmly, and in her young, optimistic heart, the idea of having enemies seemed absurd, a distant concept from movies or soap operas, never applicable to her sunny life. Jully worked in the busy downtown area, in an office where days were filled with deadlines, phone calls, and the usual camaraderie among colleagues. She enjoyed what she did, but like most, she eagerly awaited lunchtime, that sacred interlude that broke the monotony and recharged her energy. And almost always, her refuge was a small restaurant snack bar a few blocks away. It wasn't a fancy place, but it had the comfort of the familiar, the smell of coffee mixed with fresh frying, the buzz of conversations, the tired but kind smile of the lady at the cash register. It was her safe little spot, a point of normalcy amidst the urban chaos. On that particular day, hunger pangs hit a little earlier. Jully felt a specific craving, the savory pastries from that restaurant. They were famous in the area, especially the coxinas and risoles, popular Brazilian savory snacks, always warm and tasty. She left the office with two colleagues, laughing at some inside joke, the sun reflecting in her brown hair and eyes full of life. She said goodbye to them at the corner, as they were heading elsewhere, and walked the last few meters to her usual destination, already anticipating the simple pleasure of a quick, delicious meal. She entered the snack bar, greeted the lady at the register with a "Good morning, Mrs. Alice," and ordered her favorite savory pastries, two of them, to ensure satisfaction. While waiting for them to be packed to go, she observed the activity. People in a hurry grabbing a quick snack, others sitting at the few tables, chatting or checking their cell phones. Nothing out of the ordinary. She took her warm package, thanked them, and left, deciding to eat nearby, perhaps on a bench in the square right across the street, to enjoy the sun. She found an empty bench under the partial shade of a leafy tree. The traffic noise was a constant hum, but there, in that small oasis, she felt at peace. She opened her purse, took out her phone for a quick look at messages, and placed the brown paper package beside her, the inviting aroma already whetting her appetite even more. She was about to reach for the first pastry, her mind already anticipating the crispy texture on the outside and the creamy filling inside, when a male voice, calm but firm, interrupted her. "Miss, wait a moment, please." Jully looked up, surprised. Standing before her was a middle-aged man, perhaps in his early 40s. Simple clothes, an ordinary face, nothing particularly attention-grabbing, except perhaps for the intensity in his eyes. There was a restrained urgency in his posture, a seriousness that contrasted with the casual atmosphere of the square. "Excuse me?" Jully replied, a slight tone of questioning and perhaps a hint of caution in her voice. Being approached by strangers downtown wasn't always pleasant. The man, whom she would later know as Wall, seemed genuinely uncomfortable, as if struggling with his own words. "Look, I don't know you, and I don't know how to tell you this," he began, his voice low, almost hesitant, but with an underlying firmness. "But I feel I have to tell you anyway." He paused, took a deep breath, and his eyes met hers with disconcerting sincerity. "Do you believe in God?" The question caught Jully completely off guard. It wasn't the kind of approach she expected. Blinking, she answered, perhaps a little disarmed by his directness. Yes, I do. Very much." Her faith was something personal, a quiet foundation in her life, inherited from her family, but rarely discussed so abruptly with strangers. A slight relief seemed to soften Wall's features. "Then it's easier," he murmured, as if speaking more to himself. He took a step closer, his gaze still fixed on her, the intensity increasing. "Listen, what I'm about to tell you might sound crazy, but I need you to listen carefully. God just showed me something about you. Something terrible." Jully's heart began to beat faster. Crazy? Terrible? What did this man want? She glanced around, instinctively seeking some familiarity, some safety, but she was alone on that bench, with a stranger talking about God and imminent dangers. Fear began to bubble beneath the surface of her usual calm. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Wall didn't beat around the bush. His voice gained weight, a gravity that sent a shiver down Jully's spine. "God showed me over there," he said, making a vague gesture towards the snack bar she had just left, "that a work, an act of black magic, has been done against your life." Black magic. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with ancient, dark weight. For Jully, that belonged to an unreal world, to horror stories, not to her sunny reality. She shook her head slightly, disbelief battling the growing fear inspired by the man's sincerity. That can't be," she stammered. "I don't have any enemies. Nobody would wish me harm." "Evil doesn't need logical reasons, miss," Wall replied, his voice firm but not aggressive. There was compassion in his eyes, as if he understood her shock. "And the intention of this work is terrible. It's meant to make you go mad, lose your mind, or worse, cause an illness that could slowly consume you, make you lose everything, even end your life." The words fell on Jully like stones. Go mad, illness, lose everything, die. The contrast between the beautiful day, the normalcy of her lunch, and the darkness of those words was dizzying. The fear was now palpable, a cold knot in her stomach. She looked at Wall's face, searching for any sign of mockery, delirium, but only found a serene, concerned conviction. Even without knowing him, something about his presence, the way he spoke, prevented her from simply dismissing him as crazy. There was a quiet authority in his voice, a strange peace that contradicted the terrible nature of his message. And perhaps most importantly, there was the mention of God, something that resonated with her own faith. She accepted the message, not with her mind, which still resisted, but with her heart, which felt the truth in the urgency of his warning. She nodded slowly, her eyes wide. Wall saw that she was listening, that the initial barrier of shock was being breached by intuition and faith. He then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a crucial secret. "And this black magic, it was placed right there." He pointed directly at the brown paper package on the bench beside her. "In that pastry you were about to eat." Jully stared at the package as if it had turned into a snake. The pastry, that simple, everyday thing she had eaten so many times in that same place. How could it contain something so nefarious? "What do you mean?" she whispered, her mouth dry. "There's a thing inside," Wall continued, the description becoming even more specific and disturbing. "Something small, wrapped in a bunch of human hair. You were going to eat it, swallow it, and you wouldn't even notice. And the evil would start to work." Hair. The image was grotesque, repulsive. Nausea rose in Jully's throat. She looked at her own hands. She hadn't opened the package yet, hadn't touched the pastries since leaving the snack bar. The warning had come at the last possible moment. Driven by an irresistible impulse, an urgent need to confirm or deny that horrific claim, Jully picked up the package. Her hands trembled so much, she almost dropped it. She tore open the brown paper with clumsy fingers. There were the 2 golden pastries, apparently normal. She chose one, her heart hammering against her ribs. Holding her breath,
Using her fingernails, she carefully began to break it in half, and then she saw it. Exactly as Wall had described. Nestled within the dough and filling, almost perfectly camouflaged, was a small dark bundle. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of a thumbnail, but it was unmistakable. Strands of dark, thick hair, tangled and tightly wound around something tiny and undefined in the center. It was there, the physical proof of the unbelievable warning, the confirmation of the horror. A scream caught in Jully's throat. She dropped the pastry back onto the paper as if it burned her. She recoiled on the bench, her face pale as wax, her eyes fixed on the object with a mixture of terror and revulsion. It was real. This man wasn't crazy. The threat was real. Someone, for some unknown reason, had done this to her. "Oh my God," she managed to murmur, her voice choked with shock. I'm going back there. I'm going to complain. I'll show this to them." Indignation began to mix with fear. The need to do something, to report it, to understand how that had gotten there. But Wall gently shook his head. "No, miss, don't do that." "But why? They need to know." "Someone in there?" "You've just experienced a deliverance," he interrupted her, his voice calm but firm. "This wasn't an accident, not a kitchen oversight. It was done on purpose, in the occult. Whoever did it probably used the place, maybe someone who works there or has access. But the intent came from outside, directed at you. Complaining won't solve the root of the problem and might even expose you more." Deliverance. The word echoed in Jully's mind, overriding the shock and anger. Deliverance. She was about to ingest that thing, about to open the door to the indescribable evil intended for her, and she had been stopped, warned, saved. "The focus now isn't revenge or complaining," Wall continued, noticing the change in her expression. "The focus is that God saw what was prepared against you in darkness and brought it to light. He delivered you from this evil before it could touch you. Thank Him for that. Thank God for this deliverance, and go on with your life, but now with your eyes wider open." Tears began to stream down Jully's face, tears of residual fear, but also of deep, overwhelming relief, and a gratitude that sprang up in her chest like a fountain. She looked at Wall, the stranger who had become a messenger angel in her life. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. You saved my life." Wall offered a small, almost sad smile and shook his head again. "It wasn't me, miss. I was just the instrument, the voice He used. The one who delivered you, who protected you, was God. Thank Him alone. It is to Him that you owe all your gratitude." And with those words, he took a step back, gave a slight nod, and turning, began to walk away, blending into the crowd passing through the square as suddenly as he had appeared. Jully remained there, sitting on the bench, the package with the defiled pastry open before her, the sun shining, the city noise continuing as if nothing had happened. But for her, everything had changed. She sat paralyzed for a few minutes, trying to process the avalanche of information and emotions. The terror of what could have happened, the strangeness of the encounter, the reality of an evil she had never imagined existed directed at her, and above all, the clear and undeniable divine intervention. She picked up the package with the sinister contents, closed it with trembling hands, and deposited it in the nearest trash can, feeling a chill as she did so. She needed to get rid of it. She returned to the office in a daze. The trivial conversations of her colleagues, the emails in her inbox, the familiar work environment, everything seemed surreal, seen through a different filter. How could she explain what happened? Who would believe her? She decided to keep it to herself, at least for now, but the experience marked her profoundly. The world, which had previously seemed a mostly safe and predictable place, now revealed hidden dimensions, unseen dangers against which only a higher power could protect. That night, Jully prayed as she never had before, not the quiet, routine prayers of before, but an outpouring of her soul, an intimate, desperate conversation with the God who had delivered her so spectacularly. She thanked him with every fiber of her being, the tears washing away the fear and solidifying a faith that, once quiet, had now become a rock, a certainty lived firsthand. The days that followed were ones of adaptation. Jully remained the cheerful, kind person she had always been, but there was a new layer of seriousness in her eyes, a sharper perception of the world around her. She didn't become fearful, but rather more vigilant and infinitely more grateful. That terrifying almost didn't paralyze her. On the contrary, it gave her a new appreciation for life, for every breath, for every normal day. Her faith deepened, becoming the center of her existence, the compass that guided her. She never saw Wall again. Sometimes she wondered if he was even real, or perhaps an angel in human form. But she knew in her heart that the message and the deliverance were real. That event became a silent but powerful testimony in her life. Proof that even when we are targets of an evil we don't understand, coming from sources we don't know, we are not alone. There is a God who sees in the darkness, who knows the hidden plans, and who, in his infinite mercy and power, extends his hand to protect those who trust in him. Jully's beauty didn't diminish, but gained a new depth. Her joy didn't fade, but became more conscious, more rooted in gratitude. Her life went on, but with the indelible certainty that she was guarded, protected, a beloved child under the watchful eye of the Heavenly Father. Evil had tried to infiltrate through the inviting taste of a pastry, but it was defeated by the sweet grace of divine deliverance, an eternal reminder that light will always be stronger than darkness. And that certainty, yes, was the food that would truly sustain her soul forever. What an impactful story of deliverance. It reminds us that we live in a world with real spiritual battles, but that God has the power to guard us from dangers seen and unseen, even those hidden in everyday routines. Do you believe in divine protection against hidden traps? Have you ever been in a situation where you clearly felt God's deliverance reach you at the last moment? Comment below. Share your reflection on this testimony, if you've experienced something similar, or leave a word of faith about God's protection. We want to hear from you. Like, if you believe God delivers us from evil, and that we need to be spiritually aware, leave your like to support this message. Share. Help this powerful story of warning and divine deliverance reach more people. Share it with your friends, family, and groups. Subscribe. Don't miss more real testimonies of faith, miracles, and deliverances like Jully's. Subscribe to the channel now. Let's strengthen our faith together and live with gratitude for God's constant protection.